Loeser. I am the Program Director for Toastmasters District 55's Continuing Education Program, and this is part 2 of So You've Joined Toastmasters, Now What? This is our orientation program for brand new Toastmasters, and in this particular program we're going to focus on club meeting rules. You've probably been to some club meetings already and noticed that people play different roles. Well, in different clubs, they sometimes have different types of roles, but there are 9 basic roles that we're going to cover, and we'll talk about those. And some clubs have additional roles, such as an invocator, someone who leads a Pledge of Allegiance in some meetings, and then there are others who might be a joke master or a Zoom master, so different types of roles in different meetings. But the 9 roles that we're going to cover today are based on basic Toastmasters. And so there's one role called the actual Toastmaster, or the Toastmaster of the day. There is a grammarian, there's an counter, counter, there's a timer, timekeeper, there's a table topic speaker, there's a topics master or table topics master, there's a speaker, an evaluator, and general evaluator. And we're going to cover what each of these roles does and encourage you over time to play all of these roles multiple times. You will learn many, many skills from them. Many of them are listening skills. Many of them are multitasking skills. There's all sorts of great abilities that you learn when playing these roles, but almost all of these roles have a small speaking part as well, where you might introduce yourself and what you do in this role, so that when you have guests at the meetings, they can explain to the guests what their actual role is for and why it's important. Now, the Toastmaster perhaps is the most important role of all, because this is the person who runs the meeting. They're the MC. They're the ones who prepare the meeting. Some clubs have the Toastmaster come up with a theme, and they follow that theme, and the Toastmaster creates stories or interesting tales to tell about the theme to kind of guide them throughout the meeting. The Toastmaster makes sure that the meeting runs on time, ends on time, makes sure that people know what their roles are, introduces many of these players. So there's a lot of different things that a Toastmaster does, both before a meeting and then during a meeting as well. So this is a very important role, and not something I would recommend to people who are brand new, but you might want to observe the Toastmaster as you go. And there's a great book or document that's out there that you can find on toastmasters.org, or just search the web, called A Toastmaster Wears Many Hats. And this is about all the different roles you can play, but it goes into the Toastmaster role in a little more depth and detail. But you can certainly see how the Toastmaster, who runs the meeting from beginning to end, is very, very important. The job is to entertain, to inform, to keep it running on time. They're the MC, as I said, the master of ceremonies for this particular meeting. This is their meeting, and they make it their own. The next role is the grammarian, and the grammarian's role is to listen for good uses or bad uses of grammar. They also have a chance to create a word of the day to help people expand their vocabulary and encourage people to use that word. So they will find a particular unusual word that isn't used every day, and then encourage each person who comes to the meeting who has an opportunity to speak to fit it in somewhere into their speech, and they keep track of that. And of course, they love to mention when there is any sort of use of words or grammar or phrases they particularly like. And if people use grammar that's improper, they point that out and show that there's better ways to use the language. They will not only announce at the beginning what their job is, so they have a little speech at the beginning, but at the end of the particular meeting, they will give a report on what they observed. And so this is a great way to learn more about a good listening role and critical thinking. The counter is a similar thinking and listening role, but you're listening specifically for ums, ahs, so, and, when they're used as crutch words. Certainly you can use so in a sentence or and in a sentence, but if it's used to just fill time, they call them filler words or filler sounds, this is something that counter will point out. There's nothing more annoying than listening to a speaker who every couple words, or the beginning of a sentence and the end of a sentence, they have to say and so. My big word is probably so. So or for instance, that's another one. Or in other words, oh, I know I use that one a lot. In other words, so I have to try to be aware of that. So this job, the counter, helps people to become more aware of when they do this. They keep track of it, and it's only extraordinary overuse of these crutch words do you point out. If they just said it once, an once, or an once, it's not a big deal. But if they say it constantly, so, and it's very annoying. So they actually have a script and a log so that when they we explain their role just like the grammarian does. There's also a log where they can keep track of all the ums, the ahs, the so's, the ands, and all of that. And then they give a report at the end as well. The timer's role is also very important and a great role for someone who's fairly new. The timer's role is not only to keep track of time, because most speakers have made a time commitment to a minimum amount of time and a maximum amount of time, and it's the timer's job to let them know when they've reached those points. So let's just say for the speakers, most speakers speak from 5 to 7 minutes. So at 5 minutes, the timer will hold up a green sign to let people know, okay, you've reached the minimum. Now at that point, you could wind up and be done, but your speech has to be at least that long. If you see the red, it means you've reached the maximum. Now we always give people 30 seconds grace period so that you can go a little bit further and finish up, but basically by the time you see the red, wind it up. It's time to be done. And if you see the yellow, you know that you're between the green and the red, which means at this point, if you haven't begun to get to your conclusion and start to wind up, this is a good time to think about it. Table topics is 1 to 2 minutes. So you can imagine then if you've reached the minimum of 1 minute, for some people that can be challenging, and for others they go on and on and on. But at 1 minute, you can now end your table topic and sit back down. At 2 minutes, you'll see the red. And at that point, no matter how impromptu you've been answering this, it's time to wind it up. And of course, the yellow is between that, so at 1.5 minutes is what the timer will hold up. When it comes to evaluations are 2 to 3 minutes. So again, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, and 3 minutes. And in that way, the speakers know how their timing is going, and that helps the Toastmaster and everyone in the meeting to run the meeting within the time frame that we've got. So the timer's role is very important. The table topic speaker is a great fun role. It gives you a chance to practice impromptu speaking. There's many times when you may be asked a question that you weren't expecting, and you have to come up with some decent answer that makes sense, that makes a point, that may flow in a way that makes sense, that is logical. Another thing you might want to do is to practice your table topics so that you can be good in interviews. Imagine if you're in an interview and you're asked a question and you've got to be able to respond to that question in a way that sounds like you've really given it some thought and that it makes sense, but you didn't know what that question was 1 minute ago. So the whole point is it's all about practicing impromptu speech to help make you more confident and comfortable in being able to present yourself in any situation. So it's a great challenge, and some people love it, some people are fearful of it, but there is a great way to follow table topics or to do them well. And this is, think of the PREP model, the P-R-E-P, 4 letters. PREP, the P being the first thing that you should talk about is what's your point? Then what's the reason for your point? Then give an example, the E, an example of why that's your point or that explains it or illustrates it, and then state your point again in the conclusion. And it's the perfect short speech. It's actually the perfect long speech as well. You just have maybe subpoints as well. But table topics doesn't have to be hard. You don't even have to answer the real question. You could answer and by saying, I was just thinking about that, and actually the question you asked before was a great question too, and I thought I would answer that. Or you could talk about something you've pre-thought about. But if you can be able to answer the question that you were asked, it is a great challenge. So it's something that challenges us all and is a great opportunity to get sharp with your impromptu speaking. The person who offers these table topics is the topics master. A table topics master is the person who not only comes up with the questions And of course, if you're going to give questions to people that they didn't know beforehand, if they're fairly new, don't give them tough questions. But if you have an experienced Toastmaster, you can ask them a really tough question if you'd like. But generally, some clubs follow the theme of the meeting that the Toastmaster may have come up with, and the topic master comes up with topics that are around that. But you can come up with any kind of question you want or any situation you want and ask them to answer that question. Now, you don't want to call on anyone who has a major role, such as a speaker, an evaluator. They've got a lot of work they're doing and they've got a lot going on in their minds. But generally, people with smaller roles or the people with no roles at all are ideal for taking on a topic. Most meetings, they'll have 3 topics or 3 questions that the topic master comes up with. If you have additional time, you might have 4, 5, 6. So come up with quite a few questions. And there's lots of ways on the internet you can find what are some good questions to ask people. There are even games you can play, all sorts of ways to be topics master and to run table topics. And there's some great articles that you can find online about that as well. There's also some handouts. Obviously the document, A Toastmaster Wears Many Hats, has a lot more information on that, as well as a wonderful document called Master Your Meetings, another thing you might want to download and look at. But they will also introduce their role. There's usually a script that they could follow, and so you can download that topic master script, and a log where they log who they asked the questions, what the answer was, and that way at the end they can summarize what each person did. So it's a great listening role as well. Of course, you're probably familiar with the important role of the speaker, and the speaker's role is to prepare a speech according to a Pathways project. So you want to read the project first to find out what are they going for, what's the purpose of this speech, and you want to be able to then create the speech, set up a time with your Vice President of Education for when you can speak, or better yet even, practice your speeches and come in with a speech even if you hadn't planned on speaking. But sometimes someone drops out or you don't have enough speakers. People are always looking for someone who can deliver a pocket speech. You could even give speeches in other meetings of other clubs, especially if you go to smaller clubs. But the whole point is this is where we practice our public speaking. And of course, you want to follow the Pathways education program where you learn about different techniques as you go. Some different resources you'll see here is that certainly your Pathways path is the greatest resource you have, but you can also find public speaking tips in many different resources, or you can just even type it out. Lots of great resources. There's even some booklets on how to use body gestures and body language in general, vocal variety, all sorts of different ways in which how you deliver your speech, which is just as much important as the words you say. How you say those words actually is even more important, and how you look saying those words is even a bigger impact. So being aware of how you look, how you sound, and what you're saying is key in being an excellent speaker. And you want to be able to find out how you did by listening to how your speech impacted your audience. The best person who can let you know about that is your evaluator. Generally, hopefully you've met with this evaluator before you gave your speech to familiarize them, but generally they spend in a meeting time listening to your speech and then writing a report to identify what you did. There's even a great little model I love teaching people called the GIFT model, G-I-F-T, I'm going to tell you what you did that was great, and you want to say quite a few things that they did, very specific examples of what they did that was great. What's 1 or 2 things they could do to improve? What was your favorite thing that they did? And what was the takeaway for you? What did you get out of this? Were you motivated? Were you moved to do something? Did it make you feel a certain way? Did you just get to know the speaker better? What was their purpose, and did they succeed in trying to communicate their purpose? It's the evaluator's job to evaluate that and let them know what their perception or their opinion was. Now, as a speaker, you don't have to listen to the evaluator. I mean, sometimes it's difficult to hear because we think it's negative, but actually an evaluation is meant to help you to grow. It's meant to be supportive, constructive, to build you, not tear you down. So be willing to listen to this. They also should have a form, a template that they use to fill out that Pathways has for every single project. And it's a great format you can follow to learn to be an excellent evaluator, which also shapes you into being a better speaker. So learn to become a great evaluator and you will become an even better speaker. It offers skills such as listening skills, critical thinking skills, how to provide supportive feedback, and how to motivate people. So an evaluator is a very important role in Toastmasters. The general evaluator evaluates the meeting in general. They also introduce the evaluators. So they want to be able to introduce the evaluators and possibly even give their evaluation of the evaluators. How well did they evaluate? Did they identify things well? Did they motivate the speaker? Was it upbeat? Did they bring up enough positive things too? Were they very specific? So there's lots of things that the general evaluator can do to shape the skills of the evaluators in much the same way the evaluators do for the speakers. They also may evaluate the Toastmaster. They could evaluate different other players in the meeting, possibly table topics, or they could just evaluate the meeting in general. Did it start on time? Was it enthusiastic? Did they explain things clearly? So your evaluation, and you should probably keep it short, 2 to 3 minutes, because they can go on, and the meeting needs to stay within time. But there's general evaluators, another great role to sharpen these skills. So I hope this has been helpful for you in learning about the roles in a meeting. Next, in part 3, we'll be focusing on Pathways Education Program. Pathways Education Program is perhaps the most important learning tool you will have in your Toastmasters journey. So learning how to sign up for it, choose your path, and use it well, we'll delve into that next. I'm Bart Loeser with the Continuing Education Program for Toastmasters District 55. Thanks for joining us.